Empress Letitia could scarcely believe her ears. You say that you will no longer serve me after this war, but you took an oath that you would serve me until the end of your life, on the pain of death, she said, while visibly shaking in her rage and confusion. Sylvain sighed and waved a hand across his body. Do I look like those rules apply to me any longer? I died already, so the oath is now void. We will all serve death at our end. My role as his apostle simply brought me back to the mortal realm. It is because of my respect for you and my previous oath that I am even here to assist you now. The Empress looked at Sylvain with sadness in her eyes. You are really going to leave after all those years of service? Is the Basileus really so much more worthy of your service? Sylvain tilted his head and raised an eyebrow before letting the veil energies flow around him. The green cracks through his black eyes began glowing with barely restrained power. Lord Basileus and Lady Amaranth are literally existences that can only be classified as gods. I was brought back for an assured death and given powers far above my station. Who could possibly make an argument that they are not worthy of my service? Certainly not you or I. Letitia clenched her fists and closed her eyes before grunting out a stilted reply. You make a fair point. It is hard to deny the powers that you've displayed as something a mortal could achieve. I will miss you, Sylvain. Sylvain smiled at her and patted her head. I'll still be around. I just won't be serving you, that's all, he said, before he turned and jumped off the balcony. He let the veil energies flow around him and took off into the air. Once he was high enough up, he surveyed the horizon, looking for any sign of an impending attack on the capital city. Once he was satisfied that nothing was going to happen to the Empress, for the time being, he honed in on the nearest city that was beset by the xenofilth. There's some smoke coming from the direction of my old hometown. I should help for sure. My family is in the capital, but I can't have the humans doing all the work. Sylvain shunted himself forward with the veil energies, taking off at a sedate Mach 9. He used the veil energies to warp the space around him so that he wouldn't have to worry about air friction or a sound barrier. As he flew to the city, he noticed that the once proud spires of the megacity had several Azarians crawling all over them, their tentacles snapping into the building and pulling out small figures before tossing them into their maw. Sylvain growled as the black energies surrounding them pulsed and began to resemble flames. He sped up to Mach 12 and poured his energies into his claws, extending them out until there were foot-long blades of condensed veil energies. The blades that ran along his forearms began to glow with pale green light and extend. Sylvain slammed into the Azarian he'd been observing without reducing his speed at all. The diminutive cat had begun an undead bullet, piercing straight through the Azarian and gunning it straight to the next one. He zipped into his side and unleashed a flurry of strikes with his fell condensed claws. The flesh of the Azarian gave way like butter to a hot knife. The thing screeched in pain as Sylvain began to lose control of himself to anger. The black energies becoming more pronounced, engulfing him in black fire. In his unbridled hatred, he kept slashing away even after the Azarian had died. Sylvain had minced the beast and scattered the pieces in his hatred-fueled rage. He noticed that there were terrified eyes staring at him through barricaded houses. He felt a twinge of sadness course through him, before he leapt into the air once more to hunt for his next target. He followed the nearest screams of terror, and found an Azarian tearing through an apartment complex, snatching whole families out of the small rooms like he was putting candy through a vending machine. The fire surrounding him turned into a raging inferno, and he dashed into the beast, cutting off the tentacles that held a family before they could be swallowed. He bellowed out, "You will not touch them!" before he slammed his claws through it with no finesse, simply tearing the creature apart, showering the surroundings in gore as he grew hotter and hotter. The Azarian was starting to sizzle as he let the fires of hatred consume him. He leapt out of the corpse and with reckless abandon simply body-slammed the nearest Azarian like a tiny, angry god. He channeled the energies of hatred into his hands and consumed the Azarian in a gout of black fire. The Azarian shrieked in pain and convulsed for a few moments before falling silent. Sylvain laughed as he stepped out of the burning remains of the Azarian, and he raised his fist to the sky. "I thank you, Lord Basileus and Lady Amaranth, for the chance to exact retribution with my own hands. I will serve you for eternity." The Azarians had felt the massive surge in veil energies and had quit their snacking to go and quell whatever force it was that had landed in their midst. After all, without a warlord, they simply prioritized the highest value target. Sylvain could hear the screeching of several Azarians as they made their way to him, but he wasn't going to just wait for them. He focused his energies into his hand and condensed a 5-foot-long blade with a pale green core. The blade was covered in black fire, and he looked at it with glee, imagining the massacre that would be brought forth with this blade. He jumped over the buildings around him, and noticed a group of the beasts nearby, all heading towards him. He dashed towards them, kicking off a condensed veil that he was forming mid-air. Sylvain brought the sword over his head, and the second he had made it close enough to the first Azerian, he brought it down with enough force to crush Basilian steel. The sword passed through, sending a wave of black energy straight through the Azerian. The beast split right down the middle, and the two halves sizzled as black fire consumed the corpse. The other 4 Azerians behind that one began to charge straight at him, tentacles coiled and ready to lash out at the Feelit. Sylvain took a stance and readied his blade next to his head, point towards the enemy. Then he shunted the veil energies to his feet and dashed out with enough speed that it would have seemed as though he teleported. He stabbed out into the face of the Azerian as fire erupted into the puncture. The shockwave from Sylvain's movement snapped out with a horrendous crack that shattered windows and set off car alarms just as the Azerian inflated slightly and exploded in a mess of burning flesh. Sylvain roared as scorched flesh rained down on him. The other 3 Azerians actually paused for a moment in shock before they moved to surround him. Sylvain watched with a manic grin as they circled around him. He let them encircle him completely before he stood straight, held his sword high in the air, then slammed it back into the ground, the black fires erupting from around the point of impact as the ground exploded into superheated chunks of concrete. The fire spread out in a shockwave before engulfing the 3 Azerians. They shrieked in indignant rage as they slammed their tentacles forward, in the hope that they might kill him before they died. Sylvain laughed as the tentacles turned to ash the second they touched the inferno that surrounded him. He stood over the sizzling bodies of his mortal enemies and laughed in wholehearted glee. "Ha ha 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 ha! You see, you are nothing! Worthless creatures! The only thing you are good for is becoming a stain on the concrete! Ha 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 ha!" He stood there, amongst the ashes of those who had burned away. He took it all in and took a deep breath as he relished the deaths of those Azerians. Sylvain, Admiral of the Felis, has died today. Now I will be known as Sylvain the Reaper, the Apostle of Death himself, he said, as he slowly floated into the air. Looking down at the incoming Azerians from throughout the city, he smiled and amplified his voice. "Hear me now, you Xeno scum, Azerian filth. I am the harbinger of your destruction. My masters have deemed you unworthy of the air you breathe, unworthy of the very space you occupy. Thus, you are hereby sentenced to death."